All right, CNT125 Design Lab Part 2 here. We just got done talking about what's needed on the router config. So again, you need the required access list for the Wi-Fi users. You can do a bonus access list for the voice over IP network if you wish. That is up to you. Once you have the switch and router configured, we need to get our workstations in and functioning and our laptop and access point and so forth in and functioning. So we'll connect your PCs to your phones, connect your phones in the switch port, connect the access point into the switch port into a Wi-Fi VLAN. Again, this is up to you what ports you're using on your switch. So make sure again in your design and in your map, if you will, you're making note to yourself of what ports you're using on the switch. Ports 1 to 10 is this and 11 to 20 is this or whatever. Make sure you have a game plan for that. Once you have all this cabled in, then power up your phone. After things power up, you're going to check your office computer for you're going to set it for these. You're going to set these for Dhcp. Make sure they're picking up an IP address from your router. Then eventually check that you have connectivity over to the ISP. If you do not, there's some troubleshooting reminders here, and I also have troubleshooting reminders in the helpful document that I'm going to get to in just a minute. You'll need to do some troubleshooting if you're not getting connectivity. After your PCs, do the same thing with your phones. Check that they're getting IP gateway, or IP DNS, all that kind of good stuff from DHCP. And then you're also going to want to make sure they're picking up a phone number. Are they picking up an 8001, 8002? Are they registering with the router for IP phone? Wireless users, you'll need to connect in, configure the access point for the SSID and security that's mentioned. This is just a basic access point. You're just going to go into the ports here and configure. That's it. That's all you need to do. That's all I'm asking you to do for this lab. Get this configured, into a Wi-Fi VLAN port. Go in and put the basic config on right here. This is where you do your pre-shared key config and your password. Okay, that's all you need to do. If you would like, you can do for bonus, put in the wireless controller and 2 lightweight access points like we did in the wireless lab. Use that for reference so you get the correct wireless controller and lightweight access points. And you'll need to use that lab to reference how you're going to configure the controller and access points and all that. You may do that as bonus if you wish. Once that's all configured and going, you'll get your laptop configured so that it connects to your access point or, access points if you're using the bonus there. Check for IP, subnet mask, gateway, all that good stuff. And then make sure you can get over to the ISP. Again, over here, your web server, your 10.10.10.3 is our CNT.org. That's your test point. You're trying to get to that web server. Make sure that's able to be done. Now, you'll notice in here I didn't say anything about checking your access or your access list yet. I'm going to remind you when we get to the helpful document page here in a second, it's going to be wise to get all of this functioning and then add your access list. Get all this functioning down here first before you add the access list. And I'll be reminding you that yet again. So get all this functioning and then worry about adding your access list. And again, you might need to do some troubleshooting to narrow down where an IP might be wrong or you have the gateway pointing the wrong direction, etc. Use your troubleshooting knowledge learned from the troubleshooting lab, as well as the notes I have here and on the other document. Once all that's working, then add in your access list and get that functioning where it's going to filter the Wi-Fi users. Now, once that is in place, you should be able to browse over to the web server, but you won't be able to ping because ping is ICMP traffic. So if you can browse there, it's working, but if you can't ping or you can't telnet over here or anything like that, that your access list is functioning. All right, there's your quick tip on making sure that's functioning. Once you get all of that working, then you'll save your packet tracer file, and then you'll gather your router config, switch config, network map, and packet tracer file to submit to D2L for credit. That's all you need to do. We're not answering questions or anything else like that. I just need to know what your game plan is. And then as I look at your router and switch config in your packet tracer file, I'm going to look for this plan to be functioning, this game plan working, if you will. So again, if you've made changes in your network as you've gone here, make sure you update the map before you submit it. That way I know, oh, that's your game plan. You're using this subnet here or this subnet here. And that's fine to do. That's perfectly fine to do. Just make sure it's communicated in your map so I know what I'm looking for. I know that that's the subnet I should be looking for. Again, down here, there's just some scrap page area for planning, thinking. And here is your rough map that you can get your ideas worked out before you make your final map. And then down here is the grading that you can be checking off to make sure you have all those pieces. All right, so there is your Design Lab overview, as well as some specifics on getting it functioning and working. I'm now going to open the other document. Let me go here, Network Design, Helpful Information document. I've downloaded that already. Here it is. This is a ton of useful, helpful information in doing your Design Lab. First things to do, it is wise to construct your map and get it printed and ready to go before you do anything. It also is wise to gather some of your commands and configuration together. Things like DHCP scopes, NAT, ACLs, that sort of stuff. Maybe even write some out or type some out so that you know what you're doing before you get there. Last but not least, the labs we've completed today have tons of resource in. So maybe have those organized or handy so that you can reference them. If you're working on configuring the phones, go back to the phone lab. If you're working on configuring the wireless, go back to the wireless lab. If you're working on the access list, go back to the security lab. Okay? Use those for reference to help figure it out. Now, once you actually get going on implementing your design into Packet Tracer, it's wise to connect and configure up your network pieces first, get all of that functioning, and then worry about adding your access list. It's always wise to do that last. And here's another tip on that. It might actually be wise to build your access list in a text file. Access list 101 permit. Actually write it out here. And once I have it written out, I can copy paste it into your router to check its functionality. If it doesn't work, or I hate to say when it doesn't work, because usually the first time or two access lists don't play nice, you actually end up deleting the access list out of the router. When you do that, you end up using the no access list command. It takes the whole access list out. And it gets frustrating because then you have to retype it. Well, if I have it in Notepad, if I have my access list in Notepad, I can make changes here, copy, paste it into my router. And if I have to take it out and I say no access list, I come back here and copy, edit changes, copy, paste back into the router. It makes building and testing your access list work so much easier. Okay? Huge tip on that. And then also there's some troubleshooting help down here too when you're doing your lab. All right. The next couple pages are priceless information for you. First is a reminder about private networks. Here are your private networks. Remember, the ISP is handing you a 172.32. It's wise to steer clear of that network. You have these networks you can work with. And you can also pay attention to what are the default subnet masks of these. And that'll tell you or give you the basic to start with, and you can borrow bits from there. Use that to help you with your private networking. IP phone config on the switch. Remember, you're actually connecting it like so. And remember how you're cabling it. Switch port on the phone goes to the switch. The PC port on the phone goes to the PC. Make sure you're cabling it correctly. And then remember, we're doing the two VLANs on top of each other. Create the VLANs and then stack them on top of each other using the switch port access VLAN 10, switch port voice VLAN 20 for the voice VLAN. Make sure you're remembering that trick to stack your VLANs. Remote access. I have some tips and reminders here on configuring remote access on switches and routers. DHCP, I have some helpful reminders here on configuring your DHCP scopes, remembering to exclude your range of addresses first and then do the rest of your config. And here's also that reminder when you're dealing with IP phones, you'll need the option 150 command. You only need that for the phone. You only need that for the phone DHCP scope. You don't need it for the other ones. Just the phone DHCP scope is the one you'll need the option 150 on. Here's some helpful information for NAT. Remember, you do your inside-outside ports. Indicate your outside port. That's the one connected to the ISP. The inside, these would be all your sub-interfaces for VLAN 10, 20, 30. You then need the translation rule. And this gets done for each subnet or each VLAN, if you will. And remember here, this is your outside interface. That's your outside interface that you're translating to. Don't forget to get your inverse mask correctly here. Don't forget to get your inverse mask correctly there. Access list. All right, I have a second reminder here about build it in a notepad file. You copy paste it into the router. When you need to make a change in the router, you'll say no access list, and whatever the number is, it pulls the whole doggone thing out, but you have it in your text file. You can edit changes there and then repaste it in. I have a link to your port numbers. Remember, for TCP port numbers, if I'm dealing with, I'll do Control F here, HTTP, there's HTTP port 80. That's going to help me find and reference ports that I'm either going to need to permit or deny. Make sure you're also using TCP or UDP correctly. Example, with HTTP, it's a TCP thing. It uses TCP. So I need to make sure I'm allowing or permitting that TCP traffic for HTTP. Down here, constructing. Here is a sample. I'm not saying this is a right one. I'm just saying this is a sample. Here would be a sample to permit, in this case, Telnet and SSH, and deny other traffic, permit what's left. So we're going to permit Telnet and SSH. We're going to deny FTP, and then we're going to permit other traffic. That's what we're getting here. That's your syntax, and then here's how you're applying it. Now, remember, if I'm filtering traffic on the wireless VLAN, this right here needs to be on the wireless VLAN subinterface. Make sure it goes there. Make sure it goes on that subinterface. Huge hint on that one. That's a huge hint on that one. Here is some helpful information for dealing with DHCP, because you need to permit DHCP traffic, especially on the Wi-Fi. If I start denying stuff, I need to make sure I'm permitting DHCP. Now, DHCP is using UDP, and it's actually using boot PC and boot PS, boot server and boot client, if you will. So I need to make sure I'm allowing those ports. So here's a sample of permitting DHCP traffic to move from the client to the server and back. Really helpful in that one. Here's a couple other protocols that might be helpful to know. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Here's general IP phone config. Here is your ePhone DN. This will be your phone numbers. And then your ePhone config. This is where you plug the MAC address in for the phone. And make sure, again, you're getting the MAC address of this phone. It'll be listed next to VLAN 1. It's listed next to VLAN 1. That's the MAC address you're worried about. Down here, type button. You're going to do button 1:1 or button 1:2 for the DNs. And then down here at and actually there's your IP phone config. Okay, that's all we really need to do. Just the general, the DN and the ePhone. Okay, for those two phones, 8001, 8002. Last but not least is some helpful troubleshooting stuff. General troubleshooting tips, and then more specific, if my PC is not getting an IP, what am I checking for? If my PC is not getting to Google or my ISP, if you will, what am I checking for? These are some things that you'll want to check for and try to find yourself. I will help you, but you want to try to find these yourself, because eventually you need to do this kind of thing on the lab final, and you're on your own then. So this is the time to try to get a bunch of this figured out on your own before I jump in and help you. Okay? So there is the overview of your design lab, as well as some really helpful information for doing your design lab.